Bridget, I'm gonna make you one of my favorite stews of all time. And I love stew in any form. I love burgundy, I love carbonade, I love the Portuguese alcatra. But this is my number one.
It's a stew Julia style,
It
right?
is.
All right.
So starting with the beef, you'll notice this is a lot less beef than we usually use when we make stew. This is just 2 pounds of chuck, and of course that comes from the shoulder, which is perfect for making stew. We're just gonna cut it up into big stew-sized pieces that measure about 1.5 inches. I'm just gonna cut this right in half, and I'm gonna cut it down into nice big chunks. And as I go, you can get at any of those big lumps of fat and get them out.
Especially the real hard fat needs to go.
That's it. Now you don't have to get rid of it all. A little bit goes a long way in the pot, but you don't want it to be too greasy. You can actually go in there, and you can pull it away. That way you get all the meat without wasting any. It's a combination of pulling and cutting really gets you the most yield. Nice big stew-sized pieces.
If you start with already tiny pieces, you're gonna end up, well, with burger meat at the end.
It does really shrink as it cooks. Here we have our stew meat. Now I'm just gonna pat it dry because we are gonna brown it, and moist meat doesn't brown as well as dried meat. So simple pat with some paper towels. I have just a teaspoon of vegetable oil in that Dutch oven. Heat it over medium-high heat.
Medium-high.
We're looking for it to just be smoking. That way we can start browning the beef.
Sounds good.
Now I'm just gonna season it with some salt and pepper. All right, so that meat is all nicely seasoned. And of course, we're gonna brown this in 2 batches. That way, there's a lot of room in the pot for all the pieces to get nice and browned and to develop some good fond.
Okay.
So I see wisps of smoke starting to happen. So again, I'm just gonna add half the meat. Oh, the sizzle of meat in a hot pot. There we go, that's about half. And we're gonna brown these, and it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to make sure they're nicely browned on all sides.
All right.
So we'll do this first batch, take it out, and then do the second.
Sounds good.
Ooh, look at that second batch.
Beautifully browned beef and a beautifully browned pan, I might add as well, that gorgeous fond on the bottom.
Key when you're making a stew like this.
Sure is.
Turn the heat off for just a minute. Now it's time to talk vegetables. And I warned you, this is half vegetable stew, half beef stew. My favorite kind.
I think it might be a quarter beef stew. I'm looking at your garden that you just harvested there.
All these are going into the stew. We're gonna start by adding the portobello mushroom. It adds good flavor, it has umami, which enriches that beef sauce. Now, very often we remove these gills for some stews because they can make things taste a bit muddy and overwhelming if you use a lot of mushrooms.
Sure.
But today we're just using 1 big old cap, so we're gonna leave them in because they'll add good color and flavor.
Fantastic.
We're just gonna cut this up into 1/2-inch pieces. Of course, I washed this mushroom earlier, so it's free of grit.
Good aroma from the mushroom.
Into the pot we go. And there's a secret about mushrooms. They contain a ton of water. And so what we want to do is start this over medium heat. And this is just using the fat left in the pot from browning the beef.
Okay.
We're gonna put the lid on and let those mushrooms sweat. Let those liquids come out of the mushrooms. And that's gonna help deglaze that fond so it doesn't burn.
So good.
And that's gonna take about 5-10 minutes. In the meantime, let's talk more vegetables. Starting with one of my favorites, good old kale. I love kale. For me, this is classic. So to prep the kale, we're gonna take off the woody stem, and you just do that with your fingers. I'm just gonna cut the leaves crosswise into 1/2-inch slices, and they'll continue to break down so you get some smaller bits and some longer pieces, and that's perfect for our stew. So this was a whole 1/2 pound of kale, and it's 1/2 pound when you buy it. It obviously weighs less after you prep it and get rid of those heavy stems because it is often very gritty. Cut it first and then you wash it because then you have more surface area for the water really to get in there and get that dirt out. So I'm gonna go wash this in a salad spinner. If you wouldn't mind helping me finish prepping some of these vegetables, we're gonna have some parsnips. We're just gonna cut it in half lengthwise and then cut it crosswise into 1-inch pieces. Our vegetables are ready to go. Let's take a look at these mushrooms in the pot.
Ooh, looking good, beautiful color.
It's time to cook with the lid off. Let the mushrooms brown, which can take 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
All right, you can see all of that liquid has evaporated. And also notice it's a fresh pot of fond. And every time you scrape up and remake fond, you build more flavor. So that's a key here.
It is true.
All right, so in goes just a little more oil. This is a tablespoon of vegetable oil. Now we add the onions. And this isn't 1 onion, it's 2 onions. So in go the onions. Cook this for 5 to 7 minutes here until they start to soften and turn lightly golden on the edges. Oh, those onions smell good.
Incredible.
Time to add some more flavor. 3 cloves of minced garlic. And we're gonna add a lot of thyme. This is a tablespoon of fresh thyme. We're just gonna cook this for about 30 seconds to bloom the garlic. Oh, that smells good. We're gonna add a little bit of flour. Now this is 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and this will mix with any of the fat in the pot to make a roux, so it'll be the thickener. Also gonna add a tablespoon of tomato paste. I'm just gonna scrape this all around to make sure there's no dried bits of flour anymore. It's really gonna suck up any of the fat in there. And then that flour is gonna toast a little bit, and that adds flavor again. Next goes in, not just a little red wine, a lot of red wine. So this is a cup and a half. I'm gonna add it slowly and I'm gonna whisk, because now we're gonna be dissolving all that flour. And when you cook with red wine, I prefer to use a blend. It has a more even flavor once it reduces down. This is 2 cups of beef broth. And now I'm gonna add 2 cups of chicken broth. Now, I know it sounds fussy to use 2 kinds of broth. It really adds a more balanced flavor. I'm just whisking this in, making sure there's no lumps of flour left. Just 2 bay leaves, make the world go round.
You really do miss them when they're not in the pot.
It's true. Now I'm gonna add our browned beef and any of the juices that have accumulated in the bottom of the bowl. And then we're just gonna bring this to a simmer, put the lid on, and we're gonna cook it in the oven, a 300-degree oven, which is our preferred method for braising because it really prevents any scorching from happening on the bottom of the pot because the heat's all over.
Exactly.
And it's gonna take about an hour and a half before we start adding the vegetables.
Okay.
Ooh, there you go. Thank you very much.
Good smells coming from the oven.
It's been in there for an hour and a half. So the meat is not tender yet, but you can see the texture of that sauce is starting to thicken and deepen a bit. All right, so in goes some of the vegetables. Obviously, we didn't put them in at the beginning because then they would turn mushy, which is the fault with a lot of beef stew recipes I see. But we're only gonna add the hearty vegetables at this stage.
Okay.
So we're gonna add the 4 parsnips, 4 carrots, last but not least, 12 ounces of red potatoes. Again, we cut them up into 1-inch pieces. We're gonna stir these in, and now they get to braise in that beefy liquid, and that'll take about an hour.
All right.
So back into the oven it goes.
Great, let me get the door.
Thank you. Now this stew is almost done. It only has 10 minutes left to go.
All right.
Perfect time to add our kale. One thing you want to do is make sure to really stir it in there so it's submerged.
It's wilting right now.
Doesn't take much. All right, so back in for the last 10 minutes. Oh, to me, this is what stew should look like. All these vegetables with the bits of meat poking through. I'm gonna go on the bay leaf watch here. Ah, 2. All right, so now we're gonna add our last vegetable, peas. This is half a cup of frozen peas. No need to thaw them. In fact, they're gonna help the stew cool down so we can eat it faster. Just gonna stir these in so they can begin to thaw. I'm also gonna sprinkle with a little parsley. 1/4 cup of parsley. I'm gonna sprinkle it over the top. We'll stir it in just before serving.
All right.
Put the lid on, let those peas thaw, let the parsley bloom, and we'll be back and we can eat it. All right, I've made you wait long enough, 5 minutes.
It was hours.
It felt like hours, right? Oh. I'm just gonna portion you up a nice big bowl.
Just take what you need and I'll eat out of the Dutch oven, all right? I love the bits of really bright green in there too. Stunning. Falling apart.
Perfectly cooked meat, perfectly cooked vegetables, and a gravy with real flavor.
There's a beautiful red wine flavor in there, but it's so balanced. The portobello's really added tons of flavor in there, as did the tomato paste. I love that you added garlic. I love you.
I love you too.
This might be the heartiest, best stew I've ever had. Thank you, Julia. Now, to make this satisfying savory stew, it starts by browning chuck roast in 2 batches, then mushrooms and onions. Add wine, both chicken and beef broth, and simmer in the oven. Stir in potatoes, carrots, and parsnips, stew an hour more, then add kale, and finish with peas and parsley. So from our test kitchen to your kitchen, a hearty, stick to your ribs beef stew Julia style. It's hearty beef and vegetable stew.
You got it. Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think?
Well, leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or you can just say hello.
You can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
I'll see you later.